There is, of course, a lot of talk about NASCAR's new youth movement that has had a surge in the last couple of races thus far in 2022 and will likely have a surge throughout the rest of 2022. But what about the veterans of the sport? You see, one thing that always gets asked towards the end of a particular driver's career is what's left to accomplish. What other accomplishments should I garner with my star-studded list of accolades? And this is a question that many ask towards the end of many other past champions' careers, such as Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, or Jimmie Johnson. Of course, firstly, you have to ask if you even have anything left in the tank, which for someone like Jimmie Johnson, who is searching for an 8th title, seemed more grimmer every year. I want to try and apply that inquiry to the current fleet of older veterans in the Cup Series. Starting off, we have the most obvious one to discuss, Aric Almirola. Almirola's final Daytona 500 in a competitive car, if not forever, came this past year, which means there's only a few more things he can still do, in my opinion. The first one is to win the Coke 600, something that every driver wants to win. The only 600-mile race in NASCAR and the race at NASCAR's headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. I mean, Aric Almirola winning the Coke 600 may happen, seeing how he's doing very well at the 1.5-mile tracks, but who knows. There's also the Southern 500, which he has 2 opportunities to win there, which again may happen seeing how SHR seems to be back. There's also the chance to kiss the fabled bricks of Indianapolis, which might be a little slim because he's not that good at road courses. He can also try to win at his home track, at either Daytona later in the year or Homestead Miami. Then there's just winning it all and making the playoffs, which I honestly think at this rate is a realistic possibility. Finally, there's winning the championship. And well, if he can keep up his consistency and rebound at the upcoming tracks with top 10 stride, he very well could be in the running for that. It's unlikely that he'd win it, but as for just contending for it, even as a dark horse, who knows? Next, we have the longest tenured driver on the grid, and the only driver to have raced against Dale Earnhardt, Kurt Busch. In the spring of 2021, many people thought that year would be Kurt's last year in the Cup Series, and that he would hang up his helmet as a champion and past Daytona 500 winner. But much to the surprise of many, Kurt announced that he would be racing for the relatively new 2311 Racing, which means to me that he will likely race with the organization for the next 2 to 3 years, seeing how he's trying to build something there. But what else does Kurt have to accomplish? In short, nothing really. Like I said, he is a Daytona 500 winner, a Cup champion, and has his fair share of checkered flags spanning the Cup Series, Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series. But to me, the thing that's really keeping Kurt going is really the gem of the 2004 champion, and that is his ability to turn teams into consistent race-winning organizations like he did with Phoenix Racing and like he did with Furniture Row Racing. Thus far, in 2022, he seems to be bringing mild improvement to the team, which is all he has really left to do. Help this newer NASCAR team rise to prominence. Of course, he will try to get another checkered flag, he will try to get another Daytona 500 trophy, though I don't think it's likely, and he will try to get a second championship, though again, that is highly unlikely. Next up, we have the oldest driver on the grid in Kevin Harvick. Harvick's contract year is going to be next season, and I honestly think that Harvick will hang up the helmet with a fairly fulfilled career. I mean, 59 wins at the time of recording, 1 championship and a Daytona 500, as well as a Coke 600 and a Southern 500. His accolades are seemingly endless, and he's without a doubt a future Hall of Famer, like pretty much everyone I'll talk about on this list. Harvick to me seems pretty much done with racing, however, and the direction the sport is going. It doesn't mean he's against the changes that are happening in NASCAR, but I don't think he's advocating for them or even formulating and expressing that opinion. To put it simply, he just doesn't care. It doesn't mean he won't try to win another Daytona 500 or another championship, or he won't try to be competitive. I mean, he's come close to winning both of those crown jewels I just mentioned in the last couple of years, and he has come close to winning even in the midst of his winless streak that he is currently compounding. But it just means that he's coming in with a much more lax mentality. Harvick said that 2021 was supposed to be his last year, and I honestly think that it should have ended after that time. Harvick is no longer the leader of his team, but is often losing to a teammate or even 2. So it's safe to say he's pretty much still here for his fans and to finish out his contract, at least from my perspective. Next up is the only driver on this list that isn't a regular in any of NASCAR's top 3 series, and that is 2003 Cup Series Rookie of the Year in Greg Biffle. Biffle is honestly just here for the fun of it, and even if he started to point himself in a competitive direction this year, there wouldn't be much to say. You ask any NASCAR fan from the early 2000s to early to mid 2010s, and they have nothing but respect for Biffle. He never won a Daytona 500 or a championship, or really any noteworthy event for that matter. He wasn't flashy throughout his career, but he was a hard racer, and fans are really excited to see him back, even if he still isn't that flashy. Again, like I said, Biffle isn't here to prove anything or set the world on fire. Now this driver is one that will be here for the next decade, and one that still has a lot to prove, and that's Kyle Busch. Busch, I think, will either be the very last racer to have driven in the Gen 4 car, or one of the last. one of the last to bridge the gap between the old generation and the new crop. So because of this, it's going to be interesting to see what else Busch will do in his career. Obviously, a Daytona 500 has plagued him for the last 1.5 decades, and that's going to be something for Busch to try and win. He has come agonizingly close, more in the last 3 to 4 years than he had since about 2009. I think Busch still has a good 1 to 2 championships left in him. I mean, I'd be really shocked if 2019 was the last we've seen of Kyle Busch being basically unstoppable. And obviously, he can start to make a charge at passing or tying Dale Earnhardt's 76 wins. It'll be difficult, but it could happen. There's still a lot left on the table for KFB, and there's still a lot left on the talent department. Denny Hamlin is another driver that may be one of the last to have driven in the Gen 4 car too, because Hamlin has stated he wants to become similar to Mark Martin. Ironically, Martin doesn't have any championships like Hamlin at the time of recording. If Hamlin can do that in 2022, though he seems to be struggling thus far into the year, then I think he might change his mind about racing basically forever. I mean, 3 Daytona 500s and a Southern 500, as well as 40 plus wins, is a pretty good career to retire on. I mean, if he wins the title, all you really have left to do is to win the Coke 600. If he doesn't do that before the title, of course. Hamlin also has to manage his own race team in 2311 Racing, and so that responsibility may lure Hamlin away from NASCAR ahead of time. You never know. Hamlin has the most left to prove out of anyone on this list, and has one of the most left to do the proving. Then there's Martin Truex Jr. Truex has really found something in the last half a decade and has really manipulated the points format to suit his whims. His quiet, passive-aggressive nature has landed him mere seconds away from another championship on several occasions. And honestly, even though fans would be pretty apathetic about it, I wouldn't be surprised if he can get another trophy. He is in his prime and is in his peak. Now, as for a Daytona 500 win, I got some hope after watching him win both stages this past Daytona 500, but that first requires showing some strength on the plate tracks, something he's been lacking. Minus those two things, Truex is only and will only be adding logs to the bonfire he has created since the 2004 Daytona 500. Now, I mentioned one co-team owner in Denny Hamlin, but there is another one on the grid, Brad Kozlowski. Kozlowski has a few short years before him, and in those few short years, his main responsibility lies in bringing respect and competitiveness back to the Roush name. At this point, he's going for broke to try and win a Daytona 500, a championship, and all of the other crown jewels I mentioned. Even just to win a race, he's going for broke. We're really starting to see a resurgence of the mid-2010s Brad Kozlowski, and that is a big signal to the fans that Kozlowski's career is winding down, and he's got nothing left to lose. He knows the latter is true, and is pushing the 6 car either near the limit or overstepping his bounds. He is another interesting veteran to watch as he slowly transitions out of the sport. Then there's his former teammate Joey Logano. Logano is not leaving NASCAR anytime soon, and still has plenty left to win. I think he might contend for another Daytona 500 or another championship, and he's definitely not halting his wins list anytime soon. There's also AJ Almandinger. Almandinger was left in the dust as a failed experiment of the late 2000s open wheel craze, showing nothing special except his road course prowess. However, Almandinger proved with his Xfinity Series stint in the last couple of years that he's far from done with NASCAR, and he still has a lot to prove even in the Cup Series. He's just now hitting his peak, and for right now, unless that suddenly stops, he will continue to have fun and score some wins. On the topic of Xfinity drivers, you can't ignore Justin Allgaier. After minimal success in the Cup Series, Allgaier defected to Junior Motorsports in 2016, where he stayed ever since, and made a name for himself in a series where, well, names are made. He's established himself as a veteran of the series, and the gatekeeper, so to speak, of the Cup Series. I honestly don't know the timetable for his retirement. I mean, his former teammate Michael Annett retired in his mid-30s, which is around the age Allgaier is, so you never know. I can bet you that Allgaier won't even think about grabbing a cane unless he walks off as a champion of the sport. There's also Ryan Sieg, who at the age of 34 really hasn't hit his fullest potential yet, at least in my opinion. Sieg in 2020 had his best statistical season and was painfully close to scoring a win on multiple occasions. The RSS Racing family-owned operation seems to be on the up and up as of late, and so I think a win could be imminent. He might also want to focus more on developing his brother, so you never know. Now, the Camping World Truck Series is littered with the drivers who are in a series with really no timetable. You've got guys like Stuart Friesen, a driver relatively new to this series, who's really just there to have fun and maybe win a title. Someone like Grant Enfinger, who has a chip on their shoulder and is trying to prove themselves when so many others did not think they had it in him to win a title. And then you have the poster child of a veteran in NASCAR, Matt Crafton. A rookie in the days of Ted Musgrave and Ron Hornaday Jr., a lovable underdog turned fierce 3-time champion, Crafton might just become like Hornaday. He might retire in his early to mid-50s, which means he probably still has another half a decade or more left in him. And I mean, he's still fighting for wins and championships, so who's going to stop him? Now for the last driver, let's go back up to the Cup Series. And the final driver to talk about is Michael McDowell. Mcdowell, in my opinion, is on the verge of retiring. He has obligations with a huge family to raise, and on the NASCAR side of things, he's reaching the moon and back. I mean, I don't think he'll do much after that 2021 Daytona 500 win in terms of collecting another one. So I think he's accomplished all he's needed to, and will likely wind down his career in the next few years. I mean, I said that he would retire after 2022, and that may happen. It really all depends on his drive and will to continue racing with this new next-gen car. So what do you think? What is left for the older veterans of NASCAR to prove? And do you think they still have it in them to do that? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this has been the news. I'll see you.